That was an extraordinary moment, of course, back in the hearings. It was very powerful when he spoke to his father. They grew up in the Soviet era bloc, and talked about how he felt like he could speak freely here because he wouldn't suffer the repercussions he would have had he done so in his native country. His lawyers put out a statement noting that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman has spoken publicly only once, and he did so after a subpoena to appear in front of the United States Congress. But this is part of, he's been escorted out, the lawyer has confirmed, but this is part of what the president's doing. We've seen the last couple of days. It is a bit of a vengeance tour. A bit of a vengeance tour. He has, he held his tongue at the State of the Union. He didn't mention the word impeachment once. The acquittal vote was the next day, and since then the gloves have come off. He, of course, delivered that rambling 60-plus minute speech yesterday at the White House, in which he not only thanked Republicans for standing up for him, but started settling scores with those who didn't. Mitt Romney, of course, he targeted Nancy Pelosi as well, both of whom he also went after hours earlier at the National Prayer Breakfast, which led to gasps from some of the room, according to my colleague who was in the building at the time. And this is going to continue. The president is, those who have testified against him are going to see themselves out of a job soon, or certainly move to different posts. He is now emboldened. He feels like the Republican Party is lashed to him like never before. The White House feels like they've had, as we were starting to discuss last block, a very, very good week. The president wants this behind him. He's taking on all of them. And in particular, as a final note, according to our reporting, Vindman irked him the most in terms of those who testified that week. The
whole, wounded soldier
The wounded soldier, the patriotism of it, questioning the president's patriotism, that really irked this president.
Makes sense. In the last few minutes, Jim Comey, who was also a target of some of the most vicious smears from the president's, whatever you call it, yesterday, just posted this in an op-ed. And he writes, "We've passed through the legal and constitutional trials of the Trump era. They were painful, but we now face our greatest trial because it's about each of us alone, and especially about those who were or are Republicans. Will they assert a personal core value in the face of a powerfully human temptation to surrender them? Or will they still those inner voices, smile tightly in places like the East Room, and drift with the crowd? We'll know in 9 months."
Well, I think we kind of know now, right? Spoiler alert, no. But, yes, it is a vengeance tour. It is interesting that you said, the president wants to put it behind him, but he won't let it go.
Yeah.
And this vindictiveness is in his DNA. So what you're going to see will be these kinds of attacks. The fact that he would have fired Vindman and had him escorted out today. This is spiking the football, but it is just the beginning. My question is, how far is he going to take it? We know that he's going to smear Mitt Romney. Whatever you think is coming for Romney, it's going to be worse. But how far will he take it? What will he do with the Department of Justice? What will Bill Barr be willing to do on his behalf at this point?
We know what Steve Mnuchin will do. We're going to get to it later in the hour, but now is as good a time as any. So there's news that broke yesterday that Donald Trump's allies in the Chuck Grassley, go ahead and pipe in if I get any of this wrong, asked the Treasury Department for financial sensitive and very secretive financial records from the Treasury Department about Hunter Biden's financial dealings. Without a subpoena, the Treasury Department offered them over. So this is someone who was investigated and justice was adjudicated in Ukraine, nothing found around Burisma or Hunter Biden, and someone that now Donald Trump's allies in the Senate are investigating with the help of the executive branch.
And not only are Republicans not standing up to him, which we've been talking about for years now, they have become active accomplices. I think
that's Comey's point. What will they do?
But it is the active, and I don't know that there's any level here. But in terms of, this was always the most dangerous moment, I think, of the impeachment, which is, what does a president who has no checks on him do? What does a Donald Trump who basically has no fundamental sense of decency, but he has no one around him, obviously, who tells him to be decent, to be responsible, even be coherent. But what if Donald Trump, who believes that Article 2 gives him the power to do whatever he likes, what does it mean for him to be emboldened with the incredible power over the entire justice system, the criminal justice system in this country, the national security system? Because right now that he's ticking through who needs to get payback, who needs to pay the price for this, who needs to be taken out, to use his term. And I don't really I mean, this could be one of the storylines. This will be one of the storylines of the next several months because he thinks he got away with it, and he thinks he'll get away with it in the future.
Just very quickly to that, yes, I think there is that moment of that he survived the crucible of impeachment. He feels like, well, there's not much they can do to me now. And to your point about wants to put it behind him in terms of the shadow of the investigation, but he's not going to let it go. It's going to fuel his vengeance, and he's going to use it also as a rallying cry for this election.
But I think what we must remember, you say, what is he going to do next with the Justice Department? William Barr just announced that candidates have to come and get his permission if they're going to investigate opponents.
Investigators have to get...
Investigators have to get his permission, which is clearly designed that you can't investigate the president.
Clearly.
My client, unless you get my permission. We're looking at a president, and I've said on this show before, having dealt with him for 3 decades, that thinks like a mobster. Who stands up and calls a former FBI director a sleazebag? I mean, who stands up and listen to the language? And once I fired him, they all started ratting on each other. I mean, it's like you're talking to gangsters. What presidents
Flippers.
accuse?
He doesn't like flippers.
Yeah, but rats. I mean, rats is street talk. And we're sitting up there acting like this is normal behavior. Questioning people whether or not they really prayed at a prayer breakfast in front of ministers, and people are sitting there. There's no rules that he won't break. And let's not forget, it was the day after he felt exonerated in the Mueller report where he made the call to Ukraine. So stay tuned for the next day or two, because the moment he feels he has all power, he comes out with the real Donald Trump, and that is not pretty.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.